Thank you, Don. Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Craig Marvany. I was a candidate for District 5 last year for Cuyahoga County Council. That would be in a Republican primary for North Royalton, Strongsville, Middleburg Heights, Berea, and Olmsted Falls, as well as part of the township. I'm here tonight as part of Val Boda's candidate screening committee, and it's my honor and privilege to be here again before you and addressing you. As Dominic referenced earlier on, I am a candidate for the North Royalton Council President, as opposed to the sitting president.
I was going to congratulate you. I didn't need
No, sudden funny promotions we get. But I pulled petitions at the urging of a number of people, and I have formed a presidential exploratory committee, and I'll be going to New Hampshire and Iowa shortly. I will be, however, holding a fundraiser in June over in North Royalton, and you're all invited to attend. I'll let Dominic know when. We'll probably have it at Scorchers over there on Ridge Road. I was asked to focus on a given presidential candidate, and off the list I chose Rick Santorum, not because, Matt, and you gave a tremendous PowerPoint. Mine will not be so convoluted nor so entertaining. But I chose Rick Santorum not because I'm a supporter of his, not because I'm against him, but because I've been curious about him for a number of years. Why? Here's a guy, he's 6 months younger than I am, 5 months younger than me. He was born on May 10, 1958. He started out, and I started hearing about this guy when I was busy raising my family and running around on jet planes trying to establish my career as a lawyer and in part practicing with Jack Neville. And I look back on those days and I think, how did this guy get to be so, have such notoriety, be so, quote, famous, if you will, as to be known by so many people in his mid-30s? And he caught my eye, but I didn't really pay much attention to him. And so now he's announced he's got a presidential exploratory committee on April 13 of this year, and on June 6th of this year he expects to be announcing for his candidacy for President of the United States. I wanted to learn more about him for that reason. And one of the other reasons was, as a personal part of it, when I was running for county council, one of the things I had to do as a person who was relatively well-known in North Royalton was become well-known in Strongsville, which had 50,000 people as opposed to North Royalton's 30. And my opponent at the time, who is now the council representative of District 5, Mike Gallagher, was very well known in Strongsville, so I had to get out and do the work. And so I began walking Strongsville, door to door, pounding on doors, meeting people, handing out brochures, doing what you have to do. And I walked about 3/4 of the city before we got deep into the absentee balloting. In that process, I was approached by a couple of people, and they said, and it was really interesting to me because I didn't focus on Rick Santorum at all. And they said, you remind me of somebody I knew when I lived in the Pittsburgh area. And I said, really, why is that? He says, because there was a guy there named Rick Santorum who worked his butt off going out to meet people door to door in the course of his various campaigns. And I thought, geez, that's an interesting comparison. And then I heard it later again elsewhere in the city. And it was interesting to me, and I thought, maybe I should do something to learn more, and I thank Al for giving me this chance to speak to you all because of that. Now, who is Rick Santorum? Well, personally, he went to Penn State University, class of 1980. He graduated with a poli-sci degree, political science. He went on to boy, just blanked off of that one. I'm sorry, he went on to University of Pittsburgh, Pitt, I should have known that. With an MBA in 1981, he then graduated in 1986 from Dickinson Law School with his law degree. So he is a lawyer, his practice is as a lawyer. When he graduated law school, and in the course of overlap from law school, he began a serious involvement in politics when he began as an administrative assistant to State Senator Doyle Carmen in 1986. He worked with the law firm of Kirkpatrick and Lockhart in the Pittsburgh area. He represented the World Wrestling Foundation up until the time when he ran for the House out of U.S. House District 18, which comprises eastern Pittsburgh and the eastern suburban areas of Pittsburgh. He was elected at the age of 32 and stood for 2 terms and became very well known as part of the Gang of Seven, which helped bring about the Republican Revolution and the takeover of the House in 1994. He was very involved in what became known as the House banking scandal, bringing that to light and being a part of somebody who was fighting the corruption that was then extant in the House. That led to a great deal of notoriety, and in 1996, after 2 terms in the House, he ran for Senate in the state of Pennsylvania, and he wound up prevailing then at the age of 36. What's interesting about him is that he defeated Senator Wofford in Pennsylvania, and one of the ways that he defeated Wofford, actually when he ran for the House, was he claimed that the then House representative was not being back in the district very much. He was down in Washington, he became an insider within the Beltway, and as a result, he lost touch with his constituents. And that way, as a Republican, Santorum was able to prevail in a Democratic district, a known Democratic district. That then led him to a chance then to run for Senate, and as I said, he won in 1996. He was very active in the Senate, sat on the, as chair of the Senate GOP conference. He sat on the Agriculture Committee, Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee, the Finance Committee, the Committee on Aging, and he chaired the Subcommittee on Social Security, where he became a strong advocate for the privatization of Social Security. In 2006, after his 2nd term, and I'll get into some of the details of it, he lost his 3rd bid for the U.S. Senate to the son of the former Pennsylvania governor, Governor Casey, who was then the state treasurer, his son, Bob Casey Jr., and Casey won with 59% to 41% of the vote, knocking Santorum out of the Senate in Pennsylvania. He was considered for a Republican bid for president in 2008. He deferred. He threw his weight behind Mitt Romney in the primary. He felt that the strongest candidate at the time was Mitt Romney, and in February of 2006 said so. When Romney did not get the nomination, he then supported McCain. McCain was an individual who he criticized for being wishy-washy and too liberal in some of his approaches at the time. Although he did then, with the adjunct of Sarah Palin to the candidacy of McCain, then support McCain for president rather outwardly. He's got a number of different positions, most of which have been very conservative in its position. He has suffered in some ways for his support of Arlen Specter in 2008 or 6, I think it was, where he supported a liberal. As we all know, Arlen Specter transferred over to the Democratic Party in, I think it was 2008. That has garnered a great deal of criticism of him during the course of his work to try to establish and reestablish his conservative credentials. If you look at some of the different positions he's taken, he is conservative. He is a fiscal conservative. He stands for fiscal restraint in almost every issue. Although he stands for family, he stands for family values, and he stands strongly for that. He's a Roman Catholic. He has 7 children. He had 8. 1 died 2 hours after birth. Those children are young still. They were born in the 1990s and in the 2000s. One as recently as 2008. His wife wrote a book about the death of their first child, and actually it was their 5th child, but the first child to die in the family. And it was a grieving book that she wrote. He himself wrote a book, It Takes a Family, as a word on family values and what it takes to be involved in family values. Rick Santorum is an interesting person as it comes to the issues. And the reason is this. He is conservative when you look at his position on many, many issues. For instance, on family-related issues, he is not against homosexuals per se, but he has spoken out against acts of homosexuality. He has spoken on behalf of fiscal restraint on numerous occasions. He is a person who believes in the rights of the states. He believes in the Constitution. He's actually gone on to say that the Griswold versus Connecticut decision, known in the Supreme Court as finding the right to privacy in the United States Constitution, is not written into the Constitution. And in fact, as a strict constitutionalist, he would be accurate in that analysis. There is no right of privacy written in the U.S. Constitution, such as we have freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, and I'm speaking in terms now, obviously, of the Bill of Rights. There is no right to privacy. It is, however, interpreted by the U.S. Supreme Court under Earl Warren's court as being part of the Constitution and the inherent aspects of the Constitution. Some people would call that the legislation of the Warren Court. When you look at him, though, he does speak in terms of marriage being between a man and a woman. He speaks in terms of a right-to-life position across the board. He does have an anti-cap and trade position. He is very involved in his belief, contrary to Ron Paul, that we should be engaged in world affairs. We should be engaged in world alliances. And in fact, he has condemned Islamic fascism, as he termed it, in a number of speeches. He is known as a compassionate conservative on his record. He is therefore considered conservative, but he's not far, far to the right, such as what one might argue Mr. Paul would be. He does believe in limited government, and yet at the same token he has supported legislation that would expand the rights of government in some places. He did recently make a very substantial foreign policy address. As I said before, he is fundamentally opposed to the Islamic fascism that's been ruling on the terrorism waves around the world, and he believes that we should be engaged very much in combating that at every position. He has even gone so far as to be one of 2 senators that opposed the nomination of Bill Gates as Secretary of Defense, because he felt that Bill Gates' desire to engage Syria in discussions and engage Iran in discussions were counterproductive to United States interests over in the Middle East. He is a strong adherent of individual liberty by his professions, and yet at the same token, there are many instances where he's been on record of saying things that might not necessarily be as supportive of individual liberty as you'd find perhaps in Mr. Paul or other conservative and ultra-conservative candidates. Now, if we talk about weaknesses, one of the things, and it's just apparent when you Google search Rick Santorum, he's got a serious public image problem. As a matter of fact, a leading gay activist has termed a certain word, Santorum, to refer to a rather vile excrement associated with certain acts. And you see that when you look him up on Google. Somebody's paying for some keyword searches to get that out there. And as you try to discern between Rick Santorum and Richard Santorum and various respectful sites or sites of news, you are constantly confronted with a very pro-gay, anti-conservative series of websites that pop up on the Google searches. And actually, in the course of my research of him, it was frustrating to see, because I actually thought for a moment, is the word Santorum really equated with this? And then I thought, wait a minute, there's something wrong